I'd like to start with the basics of capitalism, since this issue was raised from a capitalist market, that is the United Kingdom. Is it simply demand and supply, Mr. Xu Qinduo?
Well, in a sense, it is like a supply and demand. By bringing in the drivers, usually they are not professional drivers, to the demand of the general public who are looking for a lift. That is supply and demand in this sense. But of course, for every company, even you are like Uber, you call it like internet-based company or just a transport system, transport company. It also has a corporate responsibility, social responsibility. And sometimes it is, very controversial.
Well, what's your take, Professor Toker?
Well, I would say that if you look at the matter in a way of a dossier you examine in sort of a managerial meeting, then indeed we are speaking about supply and demand. But everything in this issue indeed indicates to the fact that we are not speaking about it. We're speaking about common sense under, sure enough, dramatic and extreme circumstances. So we are used to deal with those machines, with those devices, with those new media and new technology. I would just bluntly say that here we have an issue which is directly that of a new common sense. I mean, and indeed, my colleague in Beijing indicated very well that we are speaking about social responsibility, or if you wish, political responsibility, political in the noble sense, of business companies and business actors. They are also part of our societies, and when it comes to extreme circumstances such as terror attacks, of course, other rules should be applied other than those of the machines which just regulate supply and demand.
So what exactly is Uber's business model, Professor Toker? Because Uber was a focal point in France. It actually literally raised some riots and attacks directly on the company's cars.
That's correct. There has been, and there still is, all kind of multi-partners battle when it comes to traditional taxi companies, when it comes to Uber, when it comes to Hitch, when it comes to about half a dozen other companies. And this conflict is not proper to France. Similar conflicts have been taken in Scandinavian countries, in Italy, in China, as we know, and things seem to be clearing up just recently because Uber was not allowed, as you know better than me, in Beijing, to operate the same way in China, and there's the Didi application there, which will be is and will be running services which are somehow similar to Uber. This is the way this new technology and this new devices are finding their spotting positions within the business models of, if you wish, a larger transportation. But this is the purely commercial issue. We are speaking here about something when it comes to the issue of what happened in London last Saturday over these 42 minutes in which the machine between 20:08 p.m. and 22:50 p.m., namely 42 minutes in which the machines did their work and Uber drivers were charging extraordinary prices for those who were trying just to escape from the terror spot. We're speaking about something completely different, which one way or the other will join the domestication, let's call it, of new technologies in our new modern way of consuming and operating economically.
Well, Mr. Xu, actually Uber offered free rides after the Manchester attack. Why was there such a delay in response to the London attack? Do you think Uber actually created a perfect storm for itself?
Well, I think, there's, as we said, the automatic increase, so-called surge pricing. It's an automatic system. And I think it works, obviously, when there's a heavy demand over the weekend or in the peak hours, like in New Year's Eve. There's a heavy demand, there are fewer cars, of course, the prices usually will go up. That's understandable. But at the same time, of course, the problem here is like they responded, obviously, in a very not timely manner. That's why people are not happy with that. And the least you can do is keep the flat price instead of increasing price at such such a time when there's a tragic event that's taking place and everybody was scared. And of course, free ride is welcome, but at least what you can do is not increase the price. That's why probably Uber offered in the later, the second day, basically to refund the ride fare to those people who are from those affected area and central London, and also offer donation to Red Cross. This is, of course, in the crisis management. Hopefully, they can learn something from this.
So, Mr. Xu, I'd like to follow up on that. So, when it comes to emergencies, do you see a common practice that is actually very practical for all the ride-hailing platforms?
Well, I think so. I think, if it's emergency, of course, it depends on the situation. I think if it is emergency situation, not only the, ride-hailing service, but also regular taxi drivers, but also buses, probably even private cars should be encouraged to offer a service, whether it's free, whether it's, charged fairly and with a fair price, because it's an emergency situation. But again, it is really about coordination. It's really about the concerted efforts. Probably the government at this time should play a major role in organizing all the resources to deal with this emergency situation.
Right, Professor Toker, do you agree that the government should play a leading role in organizing a code of conduct or a common practice for all the similar services in case of emergencies?
Yes, I think government should have a role. I think government should have a role on the larger sense, the sense which, if you wish to theorize on that, would be that, who's dominating whom? Technologies, do they dominate the way we live in a way which will just let it happen? Or is it that there are vectors, powers, actors, such as government, such as others perhaps? I offered just common sense a few minutes ago, which seems to be, under these circumstances, to be so much more logical. But one should look at it, beyond the cynical suspicions of what happened over these 42 minutes during which Uber surged higher prices right after over the first 32 minutes after the terrorist attack in London. I don't believe that even in utmost capitalist, cynical markets, such as the British one or the West European one, people were just cold-bloodedly trying to make more money over these extreme terrorist violent circumstances. I think that it was Saturday evening, late at night, there was no human intervention over these machines, which are automatically settled to create the balance between those supply and demand factors in normal times. If there were to be a human intervention, it would have been done more rapidly, and we saw that.
Well, Professor, talking about human intervention, I'm afraid Uber is right now having more crises at hand. Let's talk about this EU investigation into the nature of this company. Do you think it's actually a transportation company or an internet service?
I think it's both. And this is precisely why those new technologies and new media create new problems for us in order to perceive what is it, what kind of actors, what kind of vectors are there in the economic reality, and what are the new relations between those new technologies and new devices and the way human individuals are being served by them, and of course all the economic opportunities which could be, which could give some territory to some abuse. This is precisely what law, government, and public affairs are supposed to do in these new times.
All right, Mr. Xu, Uber failed in China, not due to this argument about its nature, but a failure of business operation. What's your take?
Well, I think, Uber not only failed in China, but also failed in Hungary and in Brazil, so it's not unique in China. But of course, China is very different from, say, the mother country, the United States, California, in terms of political culture, in terms of economic culture, and also the tradition itself. So it's a different market, and usually you need a local partner to navigate all those complexities. Obviously, Uber did it by themselves. This is part of the reason, probably, why they failed.
So you think localization is also very important in the age of globalization?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Joav Toker at the American Graduate School of Diplomacy and Mr. Xu Qinduo here in Beijing. Uber and other ride-hailing apps have found favor around the world as a result of dissatisfaction with established taxi firms who many feel charge too much or are hard to flag down, have rude drivers, as well as many other criticisms. The fact that you know in advance of getting into your Uber cab how much your ride is going to cost, irrespective of whether the car is stuck in a traffic jam or not, while also knowing that the price is likely to be a lot lower than that of an established taxi, has made such apps a mushroom in recent years. On downside, some complain of harassment from drivers, and the fact that the drivers are not licensed by the local authority makes many feel uncomfortable in their apparent lack of accountability. While one might feel sympathy with established taxi drivers who feel that they are getting unfair competition from the low-priced ride-hailing app drivers, it's, after all, simply a question of market forces that have ensured the success of these apps in recent years.